a special event tonight, solely because of Craig Johnson. Back in 2005, we opened our bookstore, and one of the first authors I wanted to have in that store was Craig Johnson. Read Cold Dish, and I thought, oh my God, this man can write. And now we're on book number 17. And his publisher wasn't keen to have him out on tour, but Craig insisted on coming to Sunriver Books. And I'm going to bring him out in just a second. Yay, Craig! But I want to take a second and just say that I also could not do these events without our staff and our volunteers. And I hope I don't miss anybody, but I can't see all of them. I've got Holly in the back row, and Sue Halverson to sit down, Carolyn Barr, Laura Colburn, Grant Gamble, and they're video, video, Zach Mann, his parents, Sean and Jill Mann, help, Lori Gaston, Janet Gordon's around here somewhere. So all of them come and just volunteer their time, except the staff, they have to be practical. So anyway, thank you to all of them for helping me. Now, we won't have at the end a signing line, so all of on your chairs are your books, and they are signed. But Judy Johnson and I were talking about doing something extra for you guys coming out like this in the time of COVID, and buying the books, which we really appreciate. So you'll find a bumper sticker on your. Am I not close enough? I'm not close enough. Oh, the bumper sticker. Okay, there we go. Sorry, Judy, I'm messing up the bumper sticker. Normally we would have a table back there with merchandise from Judy Johnson, but you can see, I'm not going to step away from this thing because you guys will get after me again, but you can see I'm wearing a red pony shirt, hat. Well, that was a mistake. And you can buy them at CraigAllenJohnson.com. On your little instruction email from me about where to go and so forth for the event, there's a link. Click that one and spend lots of money in Judy's store. Yeah, Judy? Oh, Judy's got something on too. Look at this. Judy, come on up. Let me see ya. There, right there. Okay, so Judy's wearing the new shirt.
What to do about Longmire Days, what not to do about Longmire. We ended up with mostly a virtual celebration of Walt. So you can find that. Here, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not used to these. Never mind, you know, it's way taller than I am. So, anyway, thank you guys for coming, and wow, in the middle of all of this disruption, I guess Walt's kind of a calming kind of guy in certain ways. But anyway, thank you, and thank you for supporting your local bookstore. It means so much.
Thanks for coming. Okay, now that she's modeled for you, come up here and model in front of you. You all need to go buy a t-shirt or a hat from her. So, anyway, CraigAllenJohnson.com. So, while the event is going on, please have your cell phones turned off. At the end of Craig's speech, we have a microphone that Carolyn Barr will be moving around so that when the question and answer, you can use a microphone so that we can all keep our masks on and fully over our nose during the presentation. So, I'm not going to make you wait any longer. How about if we bring out my favorite cowboy?
like a lot of interviews I get, like they start off with, well, did you know, what kind of an effect, you know, has COVID had on you? And I remind them that, you know, basically what I do is like go to a room by myself and type about my imaginary friends. And the closest town that is to me is 25 people in it. You know, so my immediate response is, why? Is there something going on I don't know about or what? Like, so, but yeah, it's you know, with COVID and everything, like it's been kind of wild to be out of action for the last better part of a year or so. But this kind of reminds me back when I first started out, and I heard Deanna kind of talk a little bit about like when I first started out. A lot of you guys were there very quickly. It was really kind of wonderful. Whenever I started out, I kept getting all these emails from Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Utah. You know, and people would write me, and they would bookstore owners, and they would write me and say, "When is Viking Penguin going to send you to Baker City, Oregon?" And I would be like, "Never. They're never going to do that. Look, they'll send me to Seattle, maybe Portland, you know, Salt Lake City, something like that. But that's about it." And so, but I told them, I said, "Well, what I'll do is I'll collect all your information, and then if I'm ever in the area, you know, I'll come and I'll do an event." And so I started collecting all these. And about a year later, like I had about a half a dozen bookstores. They were all kind of scattered all the way, you know, in a great big 5,000-mile circle. And so I thought, I know only Westerners talk that way, right? And so, you know, I thought, you know, well, what the heck? Let's give it a shot here. Like, so I had this old motorcycle that had like about, you know, I don't know, maybe miles on it. Like, I got 80 miles to the gallon. And so I thought, you know what? I can take off on that thing, and I can, like, you know, couch surf, sofa surf, you know, all my fellow authors, you know, all the way through the Northwest. So I did it. And of course, Sunriver was like one of the first ones. Dion was one of the very first ones that said, you gotta come out here so we can sell some books. And so I did. Well, the problem was that, you know, the book started catching on a little bit, and then the TV show, of course. And so by the time I quit doing the motorcycle tour about 5 years ago, it had gone from 6 bookstores to 32. And everybody wanted like an evening, and so it was like a month on the road after I got through with the national tour. And so I finally had to stop doing it because it was just too much. It was too much time out on the road because I wasn't getting any writing done like I was doing. It's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, this kind of takes me back to that. Now I'm starting to think about doing it again. And my wife really didn't want to hear that. Let's see, because she's afraid that I'm going to get hurt on a motorcycle. And I grew up, you know, with horses, motorcycles, cars, everything. Anything you could go fast in, that was like of great interest to me. And I've been hurt on motorcycles, but nowhere near as many times as I've been hurt on a horse. Okay? And I don't know how many of you guys get the Post-it, the newsletter I sent out. Well, then you know I'm playing hurt tonight, right? You're aware of that? I mean, it even takes quite a bit of effort for me to like raise my hand this high, okay? What happened was like I had a horse that got hurt, and he took a shaving off the top of the crown right beside where his hoof is. And he did it on the inside of, so I can't figure out how he did it. I've been looking around all around the barn, around the pasture to see where it is that he could have possibly done this. And it didn't work. You know, I couldn't find anything like that, you know, where he might have hurt himself. But anyway, he was hurt, and he was bleeding out. So I took him, you know, in the stall and everything. And I thought, okay, well, first thing to do is clean the wound up. Okay, so I, you know, dumped a big bucket of Epsom salts in there. I'm not doing it hard enough. Is that high enough? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. And so anyway, like I thought, okay, well, I got to clean the wound up first. Okay, so I dumped Epsom salts, warm water, put it in a big bucket, set it in there, and I thought, I'd tie him off. I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, he's like 16 years old. You know, for goodness sake, he's old. He's older. You know, so he's probably sensible. Don't ever think that. Those two go together, right? And so anyway, like, I'm trying to get his foot in the bucket. You know, trying to get it in there, get him to stop. You know, mincing around a little bit. And finally, like, he'd had enough. And he just like reared back and then launched forward. And I happened to make the mistake of being between him and the door of the barn. And I've always like suffered under a number of delusions, one of them being that I'm indestructible. And let me tell you, being a 210-pound animal hit by a 1,000-pound animal, it will convince you you are not indestructible anymore. And so he laid into me like, and I just, you know, I went backward like that, and over at me he went. And it could have been a lot worse. He could have landed on me or, you know, stomped on me or whatever, but he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was just scared. And so anyway, like I fell backward, like I hit the ground, and knocked all the air out of me. And I remember when I used to rodeo, when I was about 26 years old, I broke 3 ribs, and I thought I was going to die. And it felt like that, is what it felt like. I'm sitting there trying to get air back into my lungs as I'm laying there in the barn, looking up, at the sunshine shining through the slats. And then the horse, makes it worse by coming over and sniffing at me, to see what's wrong with me, And so I'm laying there, and all I could think was, oh, damn, if I die, I don't get to write any more Walt Longmire novels. I was just thinking, I'm not anywhere near being done with this guy. I've got a lot more I want to write about him. And, and a lot of them are like right around the corner. I mean, because people always ask that question. They're always like, well, how do you decide which book you're going to write next? And there are a couple of things that come into play with that as far as that's concerned. But one of the big ones is it's kind of like a horse race, jockeying for position. I've always got about half a dozen stories that are jockeying for position to be the next Walt Longmire novel. And so that kind of brings me to the book that I'm working on now. But anyway, what happened was I kind of cracked the rib on the front and on the back sides here. So it's like it swelled up a little bit, and then of course what happened was. I took the horse in because that's what you got to take care of first, make sure he's okay. So I took the horse in like that, and so I'm standing there like this as she's like soaking the horse's hoof as he's in the stand, and she turns around and she looks at me and she goes, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm good." And she goes, "Why are you standing like that?" I said, "Because if I stand any other way, it hurts, okay?" And she said, "Well, did he run into you?" I said, "Yeah, he did." And so she comes over and she starts feeling on my rib cage, and she's like, "Yeah, you might have fractured something on the front where it connects to the sternum on the front there, and you might have cracked the back part there of that one rib too." And she goes, "Didn't it hurt?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "No, but didn't it really hurt?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, did you think about going to the emergency room?" And I was like, "No." No way. That's like 6 hours of your life. I knew what they were going to do, because all they're going to do is give you Tylenol and tell you to wrap it up, right? Because that's what they told me, when I was 26 years old. And so I asked her, "Are they just going to give me extra strength Tylenol and tell me to wrap it up?" She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I can do that myself. It's okay." I didn't pay any attention. But anyway, as I was laying there thinking about it and all of this, it made me think about the book that I'm here to talk about today, the 17th book in the Walt Longmire series, which sounds strange coming out of my mouth, because when I first started writing the books, I only opened up the idea that I would do 4, because I thought I would do books in seasons. I would do 1 year of Walt's life, and then if I was done with it, then I'd be done with it. Well, here we are 17 books down the road, and Walt is like 4.5 years older than we first met him. And I, on the other hand, am 17 years older than when he first met me. So at some point, I'm going to be older than Walt. And I don't know if I like that idea at all, if I get to be honest with you. But I get that question, well, how do you decide, which books you want to do? And there are a couple of things that have direct effects, on which book it is that I'm going to write. The first one being, what kind of an effect is this story going to have, on the characters? Like, where is Walt now, in his life? What kind of an effect is this story going to have on him? Where is Vic? Where is Henry? Where's Lucian? Where's Lonnie? Where are all of them? All those characters. And what kind of effect is this going to have on their lives? The other one that I take into consideration, and may not, I kind of mentioned it here before, is I do write the books in a seasonal kind of pattern. So it takes me 4 books to get through 1 year of Walt's life. Well, if I'm going to write a rodeo book, it can't be a winter book. So, I kind of have to look at the storyline and say, okay, well, is that a spring book, or a fall book, or a winter book, or a summer book? And then the other major issue for me also is that there's usually a social issue. I kind of refer to what I write as like socially responsible crime fiction. In the sense that I'm not just looking to pile up bodies, to write a story. Generally I try and have something to say. And with this one, it was really close to home, in the sense that I was actually doing a visit up to Hardin, doing a library event up there on the Crow Reservation. And I was in the main lobby of the library, and I happened to look up, and on the bulletin board at the main lobby there in the library was a missing persons poster. And it was like a homemade, out of a copier poster that this family had made. And it was heart-wrenching. this young girl that had gone missing. And the thing that struck me about it was the sun from the windows of the doors could strike that poster halfway through the year. It had been up there for like more than a year. It was all wrinkled and yellowed. And when the sun had hit that computer printout, the sun would go all the way to one half of her face, and it was gone. It had faded it out to just a blank page. So only half of her face was visible. You know, half the phone number, and half of the reward, and all of this. And it was just so heart-wrenching to me because, you know, with 2 daughters and a granddaughter, wife, it dawned on me that, like, you know, what would be the absolute worst thing that could ever possibly happen, you know, to you, to have somebody you love, a family member, someone you love, go missing and not know, never know what happened to them, where they are, where they could possibly be. And I thought, okay, well, that's an issue. That's an issue that I can get on. And the way I write the books, I tend to refer to it as the burr under the saddle blanket school of literature, you know, in that if there's a good, strong social issue that I feel strongly about, I can get on that and I can ride that for a year, you know, literally write a book about it. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that I don't write 350-page lectures. As my buddy Tony Hillerman used to say, you better have a story to go along with this. And so I thought, okay, well, you need some kind of a vehicle to carry this story is what you need. And so I happened to be up in Lame Deer, up on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, with a good friend of mine, Marcus, and also a good friend of mine, Tiger Scout King. And he's the athletic director for the Morning Stars, which is the name of the high school there in Lame Deer. And we happened to be watching a game between Lame Deer and Lodge Grass. Lodge Grass is Crow, Lame Deer is Cheyenne. And for anybody who thinks that the Indian Wars are over, they're not, okay? They're just being played out on the basketball courts, you know, and on the football fields and all that. It is some of the most ferocious games you'll ever see in your entire life. And the game that we were watching, this was young women that were playing this game, for goodness sake. And it was all elbows and shoulders and headbutts and all of this. It was really kind of ferocious to watch, okay? But it was also amazing to watch because there was a poetry in the game. I'm firmly of the belief that like the NBA game doesn't resemble the basketball that I grew up playing at all. I mean, is there any such thing as traveling anymore or anything like that? It really doesn't exist, does it? And what I was able to watch was with the young women that were playing, it was a lot more of the tactics. It was a lot more of a technical game, and there was a lot more poetry to it, it seemed like. And as I was watching it, I just was taken away by just the ferocity of those young faces, and how they were so compelled to try and win like that. And they were just out there trying their level-headed best. And in a situation like that, that's very, very difficult. I mean, the environments of the reservation, sometimes there's such an incredible lack of hope. And you see that hope in their faces while they're playing. I mean, it's a religion on the reservation in many ways. And I remember watching it and thinking to myself, that's it. That's how this story gets told. And so what happens in Daughter of the Morning Star is Walt is lured off of his usual jurisdiction. And I try and do that a little bit too, to be honest. And I'm giving you guys all my writing tricks here. But what that is that I kind of came to the conclusion very early when I was writing a series of books about the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state, that I could only kill so many people every book, without it kind of getting ridiculous, And so I started thinking about what I was going to do was, I thought, I'm going to do these like home and away is the way I'll do it. But that, Walt will, have a home game, where he'll, have a situation that develops in Absaroka County, and then I'll have away, where he'll be drawn to other places. And I've had Walt in places, the third book took place in Philadelphia, for goodness sake. So I've moved him around to a lot of different places, up in Montana, over in South Dakota, other parts of Wyoming. So I can kind of spread his jurisdiction out a little bit and make it a little bit more believable. And so this is one of the ones where he gets drawn up to the reservation. And the major factor drawing him there is Lolo Long, the tribal police chief. She has a niece who is a basketball phenomenon. She is amazing, but she started getting death threats left, little notes left in her backpack, her car, all these places. This is something that they have to take very seriously because her sister Jeannie disappeared a year ago, and they don't know what happened to her, where she went. So this is a threat that has to be taken very, very seriously. Of course, this is also something that Walt's never, dealt with before, which is what I like to do, putting him in situations that he's never been in before. And, I've put Walt in some difficult situations, but sticking him on a bus with an entire busload of, teenage girls, I've never had him in that tough of a situation before, ever like that. So, but what I'd like to do for you guys is give you a little bit of a reading. I think that it'll tell you a little bit more about the two major characters in the books, Walt, of course, and then Jai Long. I think you'll enjoy it. Is that okay? That'll be all right? Now, I will warn you, I want to warn you again that this is like one of the first readings that I am doing, okay? So the good news is this is one of the first readings that I'm doing of this. Bad news is this is one of the first readings I'm doing of this. Okay? So it's quite possible I'll be horrible. Hopefully, but they won't be too bad. Anyway, this is from chapter 1, right from the very beginning. Blaming. Sometimes I drive to the borders of my county and look for the end of the world. Sometimes I see it. Or I think I do. But maybe what I see is myself. That's enough to send me scurrying back the other way. I like to think I used to be braver, but maybe I didn't know any better. When I was young, all I wanted was out. I was pretty sure that the only reason I participated in sports was to do that. To go on those endless bus rides, even if it was just more of Wyoming with maybe a little Montana and South Dakota mixed in. Along the way, with a little size, speed, muscle, and brains, I was able to land a spot as one of the top 10 teenage offensive linemen in the country. The University of Southern California took note and offered me a scholarship where we even won a Rose Bowl for the red and gold against Wisconsin, 42-37. I graduated, lost my deferment in doing so, and found myself wearing the khaki and olive drab of the United States Marine Corps. The Corps taught me a lot of things that college hadn't, like how to shine my shoes, say sir a lot, take other people's lives. The biggest thing it did was put a star to my chest, something that remains there to this day. I am the sheriff, final letter of the law in Absaroka, the least populated county in Wyoming, the least populated state in America. Kind of a period, if you will, the great sentence of justice. Right now, I was retrieving a basketball from dead frozen grass and tossing it back to an 18-year-old phenomenon. Luckily, I didn't have to do that very often because she didn't miss very often. Not my game. My words clouded the air between us as I threw the ball, and she caught it with long, nimble, artistic-looking fingers. Chicken shit. She turned and dribbled through her legs, then circled out to the top of the key where she half-turned and flipped up a three-pointer. All net. Or whatever net was left of the red, white, and blue nylon strands that had been faded by the sun, rain, and incessant wind of the high plains. The unraveled threads like a horsetail swishing at a fly. It was a fitting banner for the Northern Cheyenne, a people ravaged by unemployment, alcoholism, drug abuse, domestic violence, inadequate health care, and substandard housing. I passed the ball back. So, got another note? She turned, dribbling to the baseline corner, and then flipped the ball up again. I now watched its arc as it slipped through the net, the ball caressing the nylon with a swirling sound, like hope, and then bounced into the pock-marked asphalt before rolling to a stop near the ragged chain-link fence. Flipping the dark hair from her face, she stared at me with polished magnetite eyes. You don't answer my questions, I don't retrieve the ball. Her head kicked sideways in disgust, but I was unfazed. I've got a daughter. Yes. I walked over to the fence to get the ball and bounced it to her. Care to elaborate? She rolled it behind her back and then took a few quick dribbles before hoisting the ball skyward in a reverse layup. The momentum carried her toward me where she stopped and looked up. She's 6 feet tall and she doesn't like looking up at anyone in any way. But I'm taller than she is. No. I watched as she turned and retrieved the ball herself, dribbling towards the half-court line, painted on the asphalt, reminding me of the prints on the parking lot at Paris Island back when I'd first become a Marine. She shot, and it floated through, landing in my hands. You think your life's in danger? She waited for me to give her the ball. I am a young woman in modern America living on the res. My life is always in danger. I tossed her the ball. Can you be a little more specific? She circled the three-point line. It's where she earned the nickname Jai Longbow Long. The hands went up, the ball came down, 3 on the board. No. The suicide rate for Native teenagers is 2.5 times greater than the national average. I tossed the ball. No enemies. She dribbled the key and below the foul line and then pivoted, tipping the ball up with one hand in a reasonable impersonation of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar style skyhook. I held the ball. An exaggerated sigh as her shoulders dropped. I'm in high school. I've got nothing but enemies. Native women are 3.5 times more likely to be raped or sexually assaulted than the national average. I tossed the ball. You want to tell me about Jeannie? There was a brief pause, a nanosecond where I think I might have pierced that stoic reserve. Gaia began dribbling again, punishing the asphalt as she stalked towards the top of the key and the half-court line. I waited for her to turn and shoot, but she didn't. She walked towards the double doors of the school with the ball under one arm, leaving me standing in an empty parking lot. Native women are 6 times more likely to be murdered. That went well. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw my faithful companion sitting in the passenger seat of my unit, his dog breath fogging the glass. I walked to the car and let the beast out, all 155 pounds of him. He stretched and then picked a lamppost of water before looking up, rubbing his muzzle on my jeans. Think you would have had more luck than me? There was a loud noise, and we both looked in time to see a decrepit 64 Buick Wildcat with the license plate 2Res4U, belching black smoke as it came around the corner of the building with Jaya Long at the wheel, not looking at either of us. She took the drive leading down the hill from the school, her arm trailing out the open window, and then turned left towards the town of Lame Deer, Montana. I looked down at the dog who was sitting on my foot. Maybe not. She's an interesting character like that, and it's fun for me to have a character that goes through the kind of arc, that she goes through in this novel. The other part that's interesting for me is for Walt to see so much of himself in her and remembering what he was like, whenever he was a high school hotshot athlete, and maybe the mistakes that he might have made along the way. It's an important book to me, I have to admit, just because I think we're just now starting to see an awful lot more notice going to what it is that's happening in Indian country. Mark Gordon just came out and said that there have been 577 native people go missing in the last 10 years in Wyoming. It's just a real trial of a situation. I hope that it brings some light to this issue. You'll join me in enjoying this book at that time. At this point in time, what I do normally is open up to let you guys ask questions. For those of you who've been to my events before, it takes me about 20 minutes to answer a question, so we have time for 1.5 questions. Okay, so if you want to get a question in, now's your chance, but you're going to get your hand up quick and let me know what you'd like to know. Hold on a second. We have a microphone. It's coming out this way. You plugged into the wall? Okay. Okay, he's standing, so he's serious about it here. And he's got that Observateur County Sheriff's Department ball cap on with it, so.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you here. I always wondered, how did Pappy Van Winkle get into your books? And second part is, how did a county sheriff afford Pappy Van Winkle? I guess the third part is, do you have an inn where we could get Pappy?
I knew that's where this was going finally. Okay, I'll try to answer the question. If it's 3 parts, you're going to have to help me, because sometimes I forget, the third part of the question by the time I get to it. Well, okay, first off, it's very easy, for me to answer the first question. Okay, in the books, the sheriff that actually gets the Pappy Van Winkle's family reserve is Lucian Connolly. And Lucian Connolly, if you read the books carefully, is probably one of the richest men in Absaroka County. He comes from a huge ranching family, and he's kind of like the black sheep of the family, having become a sheriff. Not continuing with the ranching tradition. But even in the home for assisted living, the furniture that he's got is this big, huge leather furniture that came out of the ranch house and all of this. So he's got resources to work with. The other thing is he's a Doolittle Raider. And what I have noticed is all a Doolittle Raider has to say is, I'm looking for something, and there will be 147,000 people trying to get it for him overnight. I found that out whenever I went to the 69th reunion of the Doolittle Raiders. They were actually a hoot to be around. They were some 97 years old. Every time a woman would walk by, they'd try to pinch her. Which kind of tells you that flyboys don't change ever. And so anyway, that's the parts that I can answer from the second part. The first one, how did I find it? Is that what you're interested in? How did I discover about it? Okay. And there's a little incredulity in your voice to think that I might have found it. I got to admit. Okay. But I'll tell you how it happened. What happened was this. We were coming back and forth across country in my beat-up old truck, and Judy was with me, and we were going through Louisville, Kentucky. And at that point in time, they were rebuilding the Brown Hotel, which is the big fancy hotel in Louisville. And so they had like really discount rates. You could spend the night there for $30, or something. This is a while back. And so anyway, I thought, well, what the heck? At the beginning of the construction, they can't be jackhammering at night. So let's go ahead and spend the $30 and go ahead and stay at a fancy hotel. So we did, and we were checking in, and I happened to look behind me, and in the mezzanine there was a little bar up in the far corner of the mezzanine. And I looked at the woman behind the desk, and I said, "Is that the bar?" Because it was really small. I said, "Is that the hotel bar?" And she goes, "No. The hotel bar is down the hallway here. It's at the far end of the hallway. It's very large." I said, "Well, what's that?" And she goes, "Well, that's the Bourbon Boutique. That's the bourbon bar is what that is. And all they have up there is bourbons. That's all. Just Kentucky bourbon. That's all." And I was like, okay. So got through checking in. I pick up our bags, and I start up the steps towards the mezzanine. Judy looks at me, and she's like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Do you know anything about bourbon?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Neither do I. But do you see that scary-looking little old guy up there? He knows everything there is to know about bourbon. So let's go find out." And so we get up there at the top of the steps, and there's this little guy working there at the little bourbon bar, and he looks like he's been there since Prohibition. And most of it in a bottle of bourbon, probably, aging to perfection. And so I looked at him, and I said, "My good man, what's the finest bourbon you've ever had?" And he goes, "That would be the Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve, the 23-year-old, sir." And I said, "Well, give us a tumbler of that." And he looked at my, holes in my blue jeans, my scuffed up boots, at my shiny elbows on my snap front shirt, at my battered cowboy hat, and he goes, "It's $75 a tumbler, sir." Well, obviously, he'd never dealt with a Westerner before. I looked him right in the eye, and I said, "Well, I guess you better make it 2 then, huh?" And Judy grabbed my arm because she knew the truck we were driving was more than $150 again. So thank goodness we stopped him before he poured the second one. But I tried that first one, and I was like, "Hey, that's pretty good." And so when it came time, to write the character of Lucian in the books, and then Walt's there, in the home for assisted living, visiting with his mentor, kind of bouncing things off of him and everything, trying to get information from him. I thought, you know what, that cagey old guy would have a bottle somewhere in that place. He'd have, that's in that corner cabinet behind the star quilt. And I thought, I could use something predictable, like a whiskey or a rye or something like that. But I thought, you know what, let's use something kind of exotic, something nobody would ever know about, right? And so, I went ahead and used that. Well, the good news is I had been buying that bourbon, for a couple of years, before I ever got the cold dish written. And so finally got the book written, and it got published, and it came out. And I got a letter from the head distiller for Pappy Van Winkle's. And he said, "Thank you so much for mentioning our bourbon in your book, And he sent me a bottle and everything like that. And so, I had quite a cachet of bottles put away before the New York Times came out with a big article naming the top 10 bourbons of all time. Number 1, which was Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve, the 23-year-old. 3 weeks later, the Wall Street Journal came out with an article, the top 10 bourbons of all time. Number 1, Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve, the 23-year-old. You can't buy that stuff now. And so thank goodness I've got a backlog, up in my bar, all locked away, to keep the teenagers from getting to it, like that. And that's, that's my story, for Pappy Van Winkle. I give you one more really quick story, and then I told you this is how it works. It takes 20 minutes for me to answer the story. So my father and I were working on the ranch, and I built my ranch myself, and I had some help from my dad. And he was great like that because he wasn't afraid of anything. He'd just jump in and do it. And we were trying to build some steps. And I had the mathematics figured out, and he had the mathematics figured out. He was like, "You're doing it wrong." And I was like, "No, I think I'm doing it right." He's like, "You're doing it wrong." I said, "No, I think I'm doing it right." He goes, "Okay, we'll do it your way, but you're wrong." Well, we finished up, and I was right. And I was kind of proud of that. And I thought to myself, you know what? I've never had a drink with my dad. I've never had, sit down and had a drink with my dad. And so I went upstairs there and I grabbed one of those bottles of Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve 23-year-old. I thought, if I'm finally going to have a drink with my dad, it's going to be the good stuff, right? And I bring that bottle down. We sit on those steps that we've constructed, and I pour him a tumbler of it, and I pour myself a tumbler of it, and I'm getting ready to take a sip when he reaches behind him and picks up a Dr. Pepper, a Diet Dr. Pepper, and turns around and dumps about half of that Dr. Diet Pepper in over top of that I can't even talk. Think about it. And he dumps it in there like that, the Pappy Van Winkle's like that. And I remember going, and then just dropping it. And I thought, it was like Kipling. I was like, you're now a man. You didn't say anything. Like, I thought that was pretty cool. Anybody else? We got time for one more question. I told you, that's the way it worked. Oh, it's going to be a stretch. They're going to make you get up and walk this way.
I've read the books and I've watched the TV shows. There's a huge discrepancy, and I wondered how you felt about your characters being changed around with TV shows.
Well, I mean, the changes, mostly are like in the storylines. I mean, the characters, they stay pretty true to the, the philosophy and the idea of the characters. But the problem that they ran into, of course, was time. That's what it's always going to boil down to with television and movies too, I would imagine. I can come up with a story and then I can tell it for 350, 400 pages. No problem at all. Nobody's ever going to give me a hard time about it. But when we were first on TV, it was on A&E, and that was basic cable, and it was 42 minutes, man. It was 42 minutes, and that was all. And I saw so much, cut out of the storylines when I would get the scripts, and when they would send me the scripts. And, the humor, a lot of stuff, your backstory, a lot of things would get cut out. But I think a lot of it was just because of the time limitations that they had to work with. They had to come up with simpler storylines. I remember the first meeting that I had with the producers where they said, your books don't break down to a 42-minute teleplay very easily. And I said, thank God, if they did, you shouldn't be reading them, and I think that's what a lot of it was just that. And then the other thing is, it's just a different medium. Film and television is very, very different from a book. You guys have heard me talk about the advantages of a book. I'm always going to talk about the advantages of a book because I'm an author, for goodness sake. But I've got two really incredible advantages. First off is that, nobody's going to tell me how to do it. I'm doing it all myself. I can make it all up as I go along, The other one being that I've got this one really incredible super weapon, this superpower. It's called your imagination. All I have to do is put the words in there. Not too many, not too few, but just the right ones to get the dominoes of your imagination all lined up, and then just tip that first domino, and you will do all the rest of the hard work for you. And the great thing about that is that when you read a book, it's custom fit to everything that you see. If there's a mountain range that you envision, then that's the mountain range. If there's a guy you met one time that looked like you think Walt Longmire should have looked like, that's that guy. All of those things like that become so personal, which is why it is that books, I think, have so much more of a resonance, and stay with you, more so than cinema or television. Because in those, they have to commit. They have to make all kinds of commitments to the casting, to the wardrobe, to the sets, to all those things. But they're making those commitments. They're making those choices. Whereas in the book, you get to make them all yourself, which is really kind of wonderful. Yes, sir.
I met you in Rancho Mirage, California, about a couple years ago at a library.
Uh-huh.
I just wondered, I spent the summers up here, did you have anything to do with the Longmire for President bumper stickers?
Well, yeah. You know? Actually, those are kind of like bootleg ones that everybody comes up with. I think the one that we got is actually, do you remember the Barack Obama? It was the famous graphic artist that did the three-color, the red, white, and blue ones like that, that said hope, and then they did a bunch of them like that. And then Viking Penguin did one of Walt, and it says, it had like Walt Longmire for president down on the bottom there. And well, a lot of people took that and ran with it, and so a lot of people, I had the Walt Longmire for president bumper stickers and signs. There's signs in people's yards. And that stuff has got me into trouble in Wyoming, I gotta tell you. Because whenever the first book came out, The Cold Dish, Walt got 36 write-in votes in Johnson County. And the sheriff called me in. He said, I need you to come in and have a little chat with me. And I was like, okay. And I did. And he was like, 36 votes in a lot of counties wouldn't amount to much. He said, but by God, in our county, that's a lot of votes. And so I kind of had to back off on that a little bit like that. But yeah, but I laugh about it when anybody was, they're always like, well, would Walt ever run for governor of Wyoming? Would Walt ever run for president? And I'm like, Walt barely wants to be sheriff. He's like, every day he gets up and goes, yeah, really? Do I want to do this? So he kind of has second thoughts an awful lot of the time like that. But he is a politician. He's gone through his entire, law enforcement career, as a deputy and as a sheriff. And so he's had to be a little bit of a politician, to be out there. That's always fun for me whenever I go overseas and do tours like that, to tell Europeans like that you have to vote for a sheriff. They're like, that's weird. Voting for law enforcement? And I'm like, yeah, I know. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how many write-in votes he gets every year. He gets write-in votes there in Johnson County. So we'll see how many he gets this year too. So. Anybody else? I've tired you guys out already. Finished up? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, I appreciate it. I hope to be back next year. You can talk to my wife about whether it's going to be on a motorcycle. It ain't going to be on a horse, I can tell you that. Okay.
So we're willing to take him on a horse, a donkey, a motorcycle, an old reader truck, any way he wants to come. So now we've got some prizes for you. Carolyn, if I hand you the prizes, will you deliver? Yeah, I keep getting Carolyn to do more and more. Okay, Cassie is going to get Jane Kirkpatrick's new book. And Jane, you want to stand up? We have the author in the house here, Jane Kirkpatrick. So this book has a lot to do with Native Americans, and Jane, Craig, and David did an event on Zoom. You can watch it on our website, go to sunriverbooks.com. But they talked a lot about writing with Native characters. And we gotta say, they all three do it well. So, Kathy?
These are hard. It's like a Chinese fortune. Clark Edison.
And Clark, you've got David's book, Bigger Count, Set on the Reservation. And again, you can watch the three of them speak at sunriverbooks.com. This event will be on sunriverbooks.com too, when our genius back here, Zach Mann, will go up. Craig Johnson is liked by other authors of mystery, and another author that I admire a lot, and I keep telling Craig, right? 86 years old. It doesn't matter. Age is nothing.
Cindy Johnson. No relation. No relation.
There you go, Cindy. So one way to look at a good author is our other authors reading him. One of the books that Craig signed earlier today that's being sent to Portland tomorrow is for Phil Margolin. He writes a legal thriller, and this is the latest in the Robin Lockwood series about her life and death. He reads great.
Kathy Henderson.
Last prize is because we had her here this weekend, and she signed the book. So this is signed by Michelle Niehaus, and it's about beloved bees, people making individuals making a difference in the environment. And I know that Craig loves critters. And Michelle,
Well, I did until about a week ago.
you're welcome again. Father-in-law is Spur.
Christine Poltergroff.
Christine, you won something.
Thank goodness, somebody on this side of the room. Gotta get fixed.
Okay, so thank you all for